Hello folks, I'm going to make a video now that's going to show you from start to finish of how to configure your Ethernet settings for your computer, start up RS links, and perform a BootP. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is get our Ethernet adapter settings set. Let me just make sure that I am recording. Yep, I am. Okay, we're going to go to our Ethernet shortcut. You should have this already made on your desktop. If not, there's other videos on how to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and just right click and open file location. I'm going to double click on this Ethernet icon. I'm going to select properties. I'm going to go to this Internet Protocol version 4. I always look for this V4, version 4, V4, whichever one you want to say. I'm going to double click. And if this is set to obtain an IP address automatically, which is dynamic, you need to change this to use the following IP address. So you want to select this box, and if you'll notice, when this is set to dynamic, it's grayed out, which means that you cannot put an IP address in here. So that's the easiest way to know that you're set in the wrong state. So let's select use the following IP address, which is using a static IP address. We're going to put in our address that I have told you previously that we're going to use for this class for our laptop. So we're going to tap in 192.168.1.199, and then if you press the tab key, it should automatically populate your subnet mask. That's all you should need for here. Just make sure that this use the following IP address is selected. Make sure that your computer is set for this IP address, and then select OK. Remember, if you hit cancel, it's going to not retain these settings. So let's hit OK, OK, and close. So now our computer has been configured for the correct IP address for this class. Let's close this window. The next thing I want to do is configure my RS Links Classic so that I can see when I establish communication using BootP. So I'm going to start up RS Links. I want to maximize this window. Remember, we're using these two icons here. This one is for the RS-Who window. This is for the configure drivers. So the first one, I'm going to configure the driver. The first thing, I will work here from the top, and I'll select which driver that I want. So hit the down arrow, go to Ethernet IP driver. You're going to select add new. This is the default name, so I'm just going to leave it that. Remember this AB_ETH-IP-1. You're going to look for this in other places. So kind of remember this. Keep this in the back of your mind as we're going through this. We're going to select OK. Now you're going to look for an address that should be here. This address should be the address that you had previously put in the computer setup. And if you don't see this, then more than likely there's some things it's going to be. It's either you did not configure your Ethernet adapter of your laptop correctly, you're not got an Ethernet cable plugged into your PAC, or your PAC has not been powered up. So if you don't see this, go back, take a look at these settings for your laptop, make sure that your PAC is powered up, and make sure that you have an Ethernet cable plugged in. Once you've done that, that should take care of your issues. But for now, once you do see this, make sure that you select it, make sure that you apply, and click OK. So what that's doing is telling this Ethernet driver, this device driver, to use that path through your laptop in order to establish communications. Okay. Now we should see our name of our driver. It should be running. So we're going to close the Configure Drivers tab. Remember, this is the Configure Drivers tab. Close that. Now we want to go to RS-Who. I want to maximize this window. And remember, this is the name I told you to kind of keep in the back of your minds. It's AB underscore ETH IP-1. That's the driver name that we gave it. We just let it be it was just the default name, but that's irrelevant. It doesn't matter what you call it, but just as long as you can identify it. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to click the plus sign so I can start browsing to see what's on my network at this point. As of right now, I can see that my HMI and my VFD is on my network, but not my PAC. So that means that I need to perform a BootP in order to push a IP address into the device. So what I want to do is I want to move this window over to the side. If you grab the top here at any place along the top, you should be able to go all the way to one side or the other, and it should snap. And I like doing this so I can see as I push in an IP address using BootP, I can actually see my PAC become visible. So that's why I like doing this way. It's not necessary to make the BootP work. You don't have to do this to make the BootP work, but I like showing people that this is the way that you can see that it's actually what's taking place and when it takes place. So let's minimize this for now so I can get to my BootP shortcut. I'm going to start up my BootP, and again I'm going to use this, the 192.168.1.189, which is my Ethernet adapter of my laptop. So that's what we're using. I'm going to hit OK. It says please configure your network settings before using. Okay. So in here, the only thing I want to have an address in, I don't want to use the gateway, is I'm going to just put in all zeros. So if this comes up on yours, then just make sure that your subnet, this right here is grayed out, so don't worry about that. That's your laptop. Make sure your subnet is set. Make sure everything else is set to zeros and click OK. This window should pop up now. Now we should be able to look for the MAC address that is on the front of your PAC. And when that MAC address pops up, we'll have to wait for that. Once it pops up in this window, then and only then, and this is my MAC address here on my PAC. So double click on this. When this window comes up, please make sure that this MAC address right here, and my window may look a little bit different than yours, but it should say Ethernet address beside of it in other windows that I've seen. But nonetheless, just make sure that this address here, matches your MAC address on your PAC. I've seen a lot of times you'll have several devices in this list pop up. You'll double click and it will move right when you're clicking, and you will not, by any fault of your own, select the incorrect device. So now that we got the correct device, let's go into here and let's put in our Ethernet address, or IP address for our PAC. And remember, for this class we are using a 192.168.1.1 IP address for our PAC. So once we have our MAC address, our IP address, we're going to select OK. Now you can see that will bring everything to the bottom, our Ethernet address, which is our MAC address, and our IP address. Once the IP address has been pushed to the device, this IP address here will then show up here. Once that has happened, we will see, as long as you're browsing, see we're browsing here in RS Links, as soon as this IP address comes up to here, a few seconds later our PAC should show up in our browsing window here in RS Who. So let's give that and it may take up to 1 to 2 minutes for the IP address to push to the PAC. Hopefully it ain't much longer. But don't be worried if it takes just a little bit. It will eventually go. Unless it loses connection or something like that. Okay. Now the IP address has moved to the top, which means it's actually been physically pushed to the PAC. And now you've seen that the PAC popped up. And if you don't realize what these symbols are, see, that's a PAC symbol, that's a HMI, and that's a VFD. The main thing is look for the address. See, it's a .1. That's exactly what we were pushing. We pushed this address to a device. So even if that right there was a question mark because we didn't have the most up-to-date EDS file, and there's a question mark, you do know that it's the right device because, one, look at the IP address. Then the next thing is look at this 1769-L24ER-QBFC1B, which is the catalog number of the controller, the PAC controller that we're using for this class. So with those things right there, you should be able to determine this is the correct device. So now what we want to do is take our PAC out of BootP. So we're going to right click. We're going to go down to module configuration. We're going to go to port configuration. And because this here is selected, it says obtain IP address settings automatically using BootP. So this means BootP is enabled. If BootP is enabled, then that means that you can use the BootP utility to push an IP address into the PAC. If you lose power and it's still in BootP to the PAC, then it will go back to BootP. So even though you push this IP address in to the PAC, it will revert back to BootP and there will be no IP address in there. So that means you'll have to redo everything you just did if you lose power before you change this. So what we want to do is we want it to keep this IP address. See here how this is grayed out? We push this IP address into here and it's grayed out. So that means that until we go to here, manually configure an IP address, which means static. Now, since we're into this, now we could even change the IP address if we're not satisfied with it at this point. But since this is the IP address that I want it to stay static, which means I want this to be fixed, that it does not change. Once I've got these settings in this mode, manually configure IP settings, and I've got the correct IP address, then I want to click apply. It's going to download that configuration to my PAC to where now if I lose power, I don't have to worry about having to do another BootP. Now I'm going to select OK. And I'm going to close my BootP utility. It's going to ask me if I'd like to save changes. I want to select no. I'm going to go ahead and stop or close my RS links. And that is it. So we have set up our communications, or an Ethernet adapter on our computer. We have set up our communications software through RS links. And we have performed a BootP and then disabled BootP so that it is in static mode now. So it will retain that IP address from now on unless we go and change it. So this concludes this video. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Thank you.